Greetings and salutations. I'm Poetic Heretic, and this is an article from Mysterious Universe about an elementary school teacher using a Ouija board as a prop during class. There are a variety of ways that modern education, particularly among elementary school age groups, can become more interactive and engaging. Methods range from hands-on activities, both in and outside the classroom, to education through exposure to real-life scenarios and other activities that will help broaden the perspectives of young students. However forward-thinking our methods of education are becoming today, it still probably isn't a good idea to bring a Ouija board into the classroom and teach children how to use it. This is precisely what happened at Zablocki Elementary School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, when a teacher at the school purportedly used a Ouija board as a prop while telling scary stories to her students. The incident was learned of by school officials following a complaint from the parents of one of the children in the classroom at the time, who claimed to be suffering from nightmares after the incident. The teacher, explaining the circumstances to the child's parent, said that the Ouija board had merely been used to illustrate scary stories in an imaginative way, and that she had not explicitly referred to the Ouija board as being used to communicate with spirits, as the devices are believed to be capable of doing. Ouija boards, despite their arcane appearance, were originally created in the 1890s as a sort of parlor game by businessman Elijah Bond, and were subsequently mass-produced and popularized by Bond's employee, William Fuld. Rights to produce and package the boards as games were obtained by Parker Brothers in the 1960s. Despite their relatively recent origins, many historians have drawn comparisons between the boards and more ancient forms of divination and quote-unquote planchette writing, referring to the pointing device which is employed with the lettered Ouija board. Huffington Post reported on a similar incident involving a Ouija board used in public schools back in 2012, when Teresa Clinton, a fourth-grade teacher at Alafia Elementary School in Hillsborough, Florida, reportedly brought a Ouija board into the classroom. Clinton had brought the device to supplement a presentation of several books she had authored, one of them titled The Ouija Board Diaries: Summoning the Spirit. The book, written for younger readers, tells the story of a student who moves into a new home and discovers she shares the space with the ghost of a deceased girl. She is able to communicate with the spirit using a Ouija board, as indicated in the book's title. Ouija boards have long held an air of mystery, along with an air of mischief and even dread. Their popularity among spiritualist groups has been maintained since the early part of the 20th century, although negative connotations have often been invoked in reference to the devices. In 1944, renowned esotericist Manly P. Hall had warned of their potential for causing unrest, as featured in a statement that appeared in Horizons magazine. Quote, "During the last 20 to 25 years, I have had considerable personal experience with persons who have complicated their lives through dabbling with the Ouija board. Out of every 100 such cases, at least 95 are worse off for the experience." Ouija boards are often referenced in popular films, notably in sequences that have appeared in films like The Exorcist and, more recently, the 2014 film Ouija and its 2016 prequel Ouija: Origin of Evil. Films like these have no doubt contributed to the notion that Ouija boards possess some malevolent potential, which may induce such things as demonic possession. Rather than relying on spiritual sources for the Ouija's alleged powers, modern science relies on what is called the ideomotor effect to explain the phenomenon, which is likely due to subconscious movements in response to psychological stimuli, which may lead the participant to believe that some external force is in control of the movement of the Ouija's planchette. While the Ouija board may have kept its mystique for some, let it be known here and now, for all, that it is still a generally bad idea to bring one into elementary school classrooms. So let us look at this. Well, I generally agree with the article that it is indeed a bad idea to bring a Ouija board into an elementary school classroom. It's probably a bad idea to bring it into any kind of classroom, but especially if we're talking about young children. The Ouija board, from all the evidence I have gathered over the years and I have first looked into this, geez, now I guess it would be about 13 years ago. From all the evidence I've gathered since then, the Ouija board has always appeared to be an extremely dangerous tool and really should not be messed with. Now, I guess it's theoretically possible that all these stories are blown out of proportion, or maybe most of them are and only a tiny fraction are actually true and the risk is small. But even still, it's just so unnecessary, in my opinion, to take that kind of a risk with the Ouija board and possibly invite all kinds of negative entities into your life. And even if you don't believe that a spirit realm exists, well, if you take an honest look at the situation, you have to acknowledge that there's at least a possibility that the spirit realm exists, and therefore there's at least a possibility that very negative entities exist, and there's at least a possibility that all of these horror stories that so many people report from using the Ouija board are indeed true, or at least some of them are true, to the point that it's just not worth the damn risk. And as the article said, we even had Manly P. Hall, a 33rd degree Freemason, who, for anyone who knows who he is, you basically know he was an expert on all things occult. We even had him warning about using the Ouija board and saying that 95 out of 100 cases are worse off for the experience. Furthermore, I would say to people, if you want to use a form of divination, why would you even use the Ouija board when you're taking an unnecessary risk, when you can just use what I personally use, which is the tarot? Get a deck of tarot cards, like the Rider-Waite or the Crowley-Thoth, and learn how to read them and use those for divination. There's no risk whatsoever with those, unlike the Ouija board. Unless, of course, you approach these sorts of things with an attitude of fear, in which case I have heard of people actually going insane from using things like the tarot because they approach them with an attitude of fear. So if you have an attitude of fear, then I don't recommend it. But basically, as the old saying goes, the only thing to fear is fear itself. You know, there's so many other forms of spiritual practice and stuff like that that doesn't involve all this wretched risk of the Ouija board. You can get into astrology and numerology and meditation. You can get out into nature. There's so many other things you can do that are healthy and good for you, and I would say fairly sound, that don't involve risking inviting dark entities into your life. It's just completely unnecessary. And then, of course, there are going to be those that say, oh, well, the Ouija board is safe to use as long as you know what you're doing, as long as you do it respectfully. And, well, I will admit that maybe you're right. I don't actually know. But I am saying, hey, maybe that is true. But even if that is true, then fine, you can do that. But for all the rest of the time, if you don't know what you're doing, then it's still not worth the risk. And it's still not a good idea to introduce these sorts of things to children. That's just, it's really dangerous. Also, I would say that my disdain or caution around the Ouija board is not my being closed-minded, it's my being smart. I see this very disturbing trend, or at least I have seen it over the years, where people say, oh, you gotta have an open mind to things, you gotta be open to this, open to that. Well, I'm all for having an open mind, but I am not for opening myself up to things that I don't know enough about. I'm not for opening myself up to possibly negative entities or whatever. And so that's what I see some people doing when they think, oh, they're going to use a Ouija board, or they're going to do this and they're going to do that, because they want to be open to it and give it a try. Well, I would say you should exercise caution when it comes to things like this. Especially when, again, when you look at the actual data, at the actual witness testimony, you hear one horror story after another. And I don't mean to go on and on about this, but it's so shocking to me that we can have all of this data and people don't seem to want to make the logical conclusion that if you have all this data indicating that something is dangerous, then chances are the thing is dangerous. But anyway, that's about all I have to say about that. I hope you enjoyed. Do not risk using a Ouija board. I highly recommend not doing that. This has been another report from Poetic Heretic. Don't forget to rate, comment, favorite, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.